I'm 25 years old. I've lived my whole life in Gaza Strip and I've never felt hope like now. These young heroes in universities around America and the world are stronger than the last occupation in history.
I'm a Google Cloud software engineer and I refuse to build technology that powers genocide, apartheid, or surveillance.
Hi everyone, my name is Isra. I'm a student at Harvard and I'm a refugee from Gaza.
There's a new force of nature at hand, stirring all over the world. They are the young people whom, frankly, we have failed, who are angry, who are organized, who are capable of making a difference. They are a moral army, and the most important thing that we can do for them is to get the hell out of their way.
And for the first time in our lives as Palestinians, we hear a voice louder than their voices and the sound of their bombs, and even stronger than their control in all aspects of our lives.
No cloud for apartheid! No tech for apartheid! Free Palestine!
Hi everyone. So by now you've probably already heard of the student protest happening in universities all across the world. Students from Ivy League schools like Columbia, Harvard, Yale, alongside other major universities like UCLA and UC Berkeley have been encamping in their campuses in solidarity with Palestine. Others have decided to show their support by showing up to their graduations with signs, Palestinian flags, fears. This has caused quite a stir. Every major news outlets for the last couple months have been talking about it, police infiltrating these campuses to arrest these students, and it's not just the police, highly advanced militias have been coming out of the woodworks to break up these encampments. These students are putting their safety, their degrees, their careers, their recognition from a prestigious university on the line for Palestine, as these universities are now cancelling graduations, threatening mass suspensions, or just making up stupid rules like no flags or signs at graduations, to which these students have worked around very cleverly. I know I'm a bit late to this topic, as this was something that was trending a couple months ago, but it is no less relevant now than it was back then. The genocide against Palestinian people is still happening. It has been going on for the past 291 days as of writing this video. Even where I'm from, in Australia, students all over the country have been striking, protesting, holding encampments in their campuses, and they have suffered just as unjust repercussions simply for exercising their right to free speech. In May of this year, Monash University experienced an attack from pro-Israeli and far-right groups who infiltrated their campus, destroying properties, shaking their tents. Universities are banning words like Intifada and pro-Palestine chants like "from the river to the sea." In Melbourne University, over 100 students camped in buildings overnight, ignoring the university's request to leave, causing the police to be called. One of the major demands of the students is for their universities to cut ties with major weapon manufacturers like Lockheed Martin that has been supplying Israel, which these students are forced to fund with their tuition worth thousands of dollars. But today, I don't want to talk too much about that. Instead, I would like to divert the attention on me, on my generation rather, on us. Because as I've been sitting back watching all this go down, a question kept looming at the back of my mind. Why Gen Z? Why is Gen Z at the forefront of the pro-Palestine movement? Why is it always my generation that is on the front lines of every major political movement? Why are we so active, so outspoken, so out there compared to other generations? Now, before I get into it, I do want to make it clear that a majority of the younger generation is not like this. I know from all these news reports, it may seem like every single Gen Zer, every person born between 1997 to 2012 are radical leftist, communists that is out to destroy the current system, when that is simply not the case. I can tell you from experience, as I am currently in university right now, and while I personally have been attending protests and doing other activism work behind the scenes, most of my classmates, most of the people around me in my everyday life are not like that. And these are young people, mind you, people around my age or even younger, yet the topic of Palestine is something that seems to even make them queasy. I remember a couple months ago when I was sitting down with a bunch of people from my class, and I don't remember exactly what we were talking about, but I casually brought up Palestine and what is happening there. And I kid you not, there was like a silence, this heaviness that fell into the room. Before this, everybody was casually laughing, joking around, and now everyone looked so uncomfortable. There was this look on their face like, we are not supposed to talk about that. And the awkward silence that followed after lasted a good couple of minutes. And I am not the only one. I have spoken to people who have showed up to classes wearing Palestine pins, solidarity badges, keffiyehs, and they too have noticed how people would treat them differently. They would be ignored, people would seem uncomfortable around them, people would pretend not to notice them or what they're wearing. It is especially disheartening when it's coming from people from your generation, especially with how the media keeps harping on about how the younger generation is so radical and progressive. But in reality, I would say that most young people, even Gen Z, are still complicit with the Palestinian genocide, which can make being pro-Palestine, knowing about Palestinian history, all the horrific things that is happening there, yet being forced to carry on with your everyday life, it can be a very alienating experience. There is a poem by Vinay Krishnan called There is Laundry to Do and a Genocide to Stop that went viral a couple months ago, which I think sums up this experience perfectly. But despite this, I would still say that most young people today are more left-leaning and progressive compared to the previous generations. In this video, I'll be talking about the pro-Palestine movement, but even with other social political movements like Black Lives Matter, trans rights, reproductive rights, young people have always showed up front and center. Today, I want to talk about why that is, and so far, I've come up with a few reasons. So, following the Balfour Declaration in 1917, Palestine was given to Jewish settlers by the British, who claimed that Palestine was a land without a people for a people without a land, in other words, terra nullius. During the First World War, the British was fighting against the Ottoman Empire. Palestine was under the Ottoman rule for over 400 years at that point, and the British made a deal with Palestine that if they fought for them against the Ottoman rule, they would be left alone, would be granted rights to their land, form their own national identity with no more rules and regimes on the Middle East from any other nations. So Palestinians did just that. They fought against the Ottoman Empire, won, but then the British decided to backtrack. They basically went, yeah, so about the land that we said that we are going to give it to you, that you rightfully own, where you've been living for generations, nah, we're actually going to give it to the Zionists from Israel. Arthur James Balfour, who was the Foreign Secretary of Britain at the time, delivered what is known as the Balfour Declaration to Lord Walter Rothschild, a British Zionist leader, where he promised that Palestine will be a national home for Jewish people. This declaration was even included in Britain's League of Nations. Balfour did this for two reasons. Firstly, he wanted the Jewish support of Britain during World War I, but also Balfour himself was not a big fan of Jews. Like, he once wrote about how the Jews were alien and even hostile, which it was equally unable to expel or to absorb. It may seem confusing at first as to why Balfour supported Zionism and did them such a huge favor if he himself was so anti-Semitic, but that's exactly why he did it. Basically, Balfour believed that the Jews were so alien, so incapable of assimilating with the rest of the world, that it would be better off if they just left and formed their own state away from everybody else. So Palestine was given the Jews as this empty land for them to build their own state, but the problem was that Palestine was not empty. There were hundreds of thousands of people living on it for generations who weren't even acknowledged. The Balfour Declaration didn't address anything about Arabs or Palestinian people, it was just Jews and non-Jews. During 1917, Jews made up only 6% of the Palestinian population, so a small minority, and they were trying to make Palestine a majority Jewish nation when only 6% of its population was Jewish. And that caused years and decades of conflict that is just way too much to get into for this video. But if you're interested in learning more, I highly recommend reading Rashid Khalidi's book, The 100 Years War on Palestine. Khalidi is a Palestinian academic and a professor who listed off pretty much every single conflict that happened between Israel and Palestine over the last century in his book. Palestine was turned into an apartheid state with segregation between the Jews and the Arabs. The native Arab population of Palestine experienced discrimination in every facet of life, from not being able to receive citizenship on a land that they have been living on for generations, whilst Jewish migrants were easily granted citizenship simply on the basis of them being Jewish. They were made to carry permits to travel around their own land. There were specific checkpoints where they had to be interrogated before going through. The international support for Israel and Zionism only grew after the horrors of World War II, around about which United States decided to jump in and support Israel, supplying them with weapons, bombs, and other military equipment since. In 1948, so just 3 years after World War II ended, the Nakba happened. Nakba translates to catastrophe in Arabic and was one of the biggest attacks on Palestinian people up until that point, with nearly 750,000 Palestinian people being displaced by being expelled from their homes or by being made to flee into other neighboring Arab nations. In 1982, Israel decided to invade Lebanon to attack members of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, or the PLO, who were forced to flee to Lebanon after the Nakba happened. And this brings me to my next point, which is that Israel is not going to stop at Palestine. Once they've gotten their way, have managed to entirely ethnically cleanse Palestine, they're going to go after the other Middle Eastern countries. This is something that they've been open about since the very beginning with what they've called the Greater Israel Project. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held up a map of what he called the New Middle East that completely removes Palestine and highlights other Middle Eastern nations that they're planning to invade just on late September of last year at an UN conference, so not even a month before October 7 happened. There are already some IDF soldiers that were seen wearing the Greater Israel patch. And that brings me to what I think is the most profound quote of Khalidi's book, where he goes on to say, regardless of its wavering, the United States, the great imperial power of the age, together with Great Britain before it, extended full back into the Zionist movement and the State of Israel. But they have been trying to do the impossible, impose a colonial reality on Palestine in a post-colonial age. A lot of the rhetoric that is spread by the IDF or the Zionists feel very outdated. Part of it is because it is outdated. A lot of this history began during the First and the Second World War, but also at this current age, things like colonization, ethnic cleansing, genocide, or even war has extremely negative connotations. These are supposed to be things from the past that should not be happening today. Even from the way Israeli officials talk about Palestinian people, literal children, like just a week after October 7, Netanyahu went on to say in a now deleted tweet, "This is a struggle between children of light and children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle." I literally felt nauseous when I first read this. This sort of dehumanizing language is something you read in history books. Ironically, this is the kind of genocidal language that the Nazis used that we've sworn to never happen again. Especially with the younger generations, we have been drilled into our heads on how horrible this kind of stuff is. It's in our curriculum, it's in our history books, it's in our poems that we had to study and analyze in English classes. I don't know much about other countries, but I went through the high school system here in Australia, and for me, we were taught extensively about the history of Aboriginal Australians, about the massacres, the stolen generations, the colonizations, and it is the exact same thing that is happening to Palestinian people right now. I myself too come from a background of people who survived a genocide, which is part of the reason why we moved to Australia in the first place. So this pro-Palestine movement is very personal to me, and it should be to anyone who has been victims of colonization and imperialism, which is everyone, especially black and brown people. It reminds me of one of my favorite chants that we've been doing at the protests that I've been going to that goes, "In our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians." What is happening in Palestine right now is part of the exact same genocidal machine that caused colonialism and imperialism. Therefore, the pro-Palestine movement is directly against colonialism and imperialism. It is a leftist movement. It's not liberal, it's not centrist, it's leftist. Which is why it makes people so uncomfortable, because to be pro-Palestine, you have to openly critique the system that we're in. You know, whenever liberals enter a radical leftist movement, they always try to water it down. Say during the Black Lives Matter protest of 2020, the initial demand of abolish the police became defund the police, as in the police and the justice system is fine, but it only needs to be defunded. There can be no billionaires becomes tax the billionaires, as in billionaires are fine, they can exist as long as they're taxed properly. But with Palestine, you can't really do that. There is no way for you to water down a genocide, especially with how open Israel is being about what it's doing. When it comes to a genocide, it's very black or white. You're either with it or you're not. There is no sitting on the fence. You have to pick a side. Being complicit at the face of genocide means you're siding with the oppressor. Some people are still adamant on referring to this genocide as war, as if both sides have equal powers and are just fighting against each other. But even then, war still has negative connotations in our society. It's no longer seen as this act of bravery and rebellion like previous generations. Now, war evokes imagery of destruction, tragedy, and death. This is especially true for younger generations. Military recruitment numbers have been a record-breaking low for years now. Military all across the world are desperate for any sort of recruitment. Like I've seen military ads targeting to gamers now, which you have to be really desperate if that's the demographic that you're going for. And again, part of it is because of the things that are being taught in schools about these topics. For example, many of you may have studied this poem by Wilfred Owen in English classes titled Dulce et Decorum Est, translating from Latin as "It's sweet and fitting to die for one's country." Owen's poem paints a horrific, graphic image of war where young soldiers get attacked with poisonous gas, with one soldier failing to put on his gas mask on time, causing him to vomit blood at every jolt of the wagon that they were in after. Owen's poem was a direct response to the pro-war propaganda in World War I that portrayed war as this brave, heroic thing to fight for one's country and glory. Compared to pro-war propaganda, works like Owen's felt more truthful, more honest, as it portrayed a realistic image of what war is about. And speaking of realism, in the mid-50s, something else happened that gave a much more realistic vision of what war is about, which was the invention of color television. Color television came into the United States in 1954, just a year before Vietnam War broke out in 1955. Thus, people were able to see in full color, from the comfort of their own homes, the destructive and horrific realities of war being played out in front of their eyes. Now the technology is much more advanced. You can film not just in color but in high definition, in 4K, and anyone can do it at any time as it is portable. You can just keep it in your pocket. I am using one right now actually as a mic. I am of course talking about phones. Now, I'm not going to get too much into all of the content that is coming out of Palestine or Gaza. I'm sure we've all seen the videos, the rubble, the children, and it's not just because they're too graphic for me to get into or show, but also I really don't have much to say about them aside from it being absolutely heartbreaking. Even that is too little of a word to describe what's happening. The death toll for children in Gaza has been said to be 14,500 so far, but honestly at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a lot more. A lot of these videos are coming out on TikTok since TikTok has a more laxed terms of service compared to other social media platforms like Instagram or YouTube. I mean, it's no surprise that there is discussions of TikTok getting banned happening all over again. All of this information is coming out of TikTok, but there is a direct correlation between all these TikToks and young people getting radicalized into getting involved with the pro-Palestine cause. Most people that are on TikTok are young, which means that they're getting a front row seat into witnessing what is happening in Palestine, sometimes even before it is covered by the mainstream media. But I want to go a bit deeper than that and talk about some of the prominent figures from Palestine. Bisan Oda is a journalist and activist from Palestine who has gained millions of followers on various platforms by documenting her daily life in Gaza Strip. She has a way of being on camera that feels authentic, causing a lot of people to get emotionally attached to the point they tune in with her every single day. Montage Aziza is a photojournalist from Palestine who has been documenting the atrocities committed by the IDF on his Instagram, garnering millions of followers. He has escaped the Gaza Strip now, but he is still doing incredible journalistic work. Most of the viral images and videos that are coming out of Gaza are his work. I know it may not seem like it, but Bisan and Montage are both only about 25 years old. I definitely thought they were a lot older, but they both belong to the same generation as I do. Having literal influencers from Gaza that you can follow and connect to, that are around the same age as you, that are personable and relatable, have definitely played a key role into getting young people to get invested into the Palestinian cause. For me, it's not so much the graphic videos of death and destruction from Gaza that has been heartbreaking, but more so about how Gaza was before October 7th happened, seeing how beautiful Gaza was before this genocide, how happy and peaceful these people were, learning about their individual stories, dreams, ambitions, hope has been very moving for me. And also it made me realize that we really aren't that different. Despite the propaganda that the mainstream media may spread about Palestinian people, fear-mongering about Hamas, or Israeli Prime Minister going off about how Palestinian children are children of darkness with law of the jungle, turns out Palestinian people are just people, just like everyone else. We may speak different languages, follow different religions, have different skin colors, but at the end of the day, we're all human beings trying to survive against the common enemy. It is often said that this genocide against Palestine is the most documented genocide in history due to all the technology that is available, but all this exposure has also brought in a sense of togetherness. For me, Palestinians are no longer just some number from some nebulous land on the other end of the world. These are real people with names, families, dreams, identities, whom we share the same humanity with. But while the light was being shed on what is happening in Palestine, on the other end of the world, something absurd was happening. People were finally waking up to the true nature of the people that were supposed to be relatable, who we are supposed to follow, supposed to look up to. These were the celebrities, influencers, and of course, politicians. The 2024 Met Gala was an absolute shit show. Now, don't get me wrong, Met Gala has always been dystopian, out of touch, tone deaf, etc., all those things. I mean, it's essentially a party for rich people patting each other on the backs for being rich. But when in May of this year, Met Gala was held in midst of an active genocide in Palestine, it felt different. Firstly, let's talk about this year's theme. The dress code for this year's Met Gala was The Garden of Time, which is based off of J.G. Ballard's short story of the same name. The story is about an aristocratic couple living in luxury, using magical flowers to slow down time and to keep the rabble at bay from attacking them. But as the story goes on, the couple starts to run out of flowers and the mob keeps getting closer and closer. And if that wasn't bad enough, the whole event had a really weird vibe to it. There were a lot of comparisons being made to the Hunger Games capital. TikToks contrasting Met Gala to what was happening in Palestine went absolutely viral. There was this TikTok of Hailey Bailey saying, "Let them eat cake. Let them eat cake."
Here, take the bomb.
This has been taken down now, thankfully, but there was no hiding it now. Celebrities and influencers have mostly young, impressionable fans to whom they have to maintain this fine line between flaunting their wealth and seeming relatable, but after Met Gala, that line has vanished. And before anyone jumps to their defense by going, "Oh, maybe they just don't know about what's happening in Palestine," it's been months. Even I didn't know much about this until October 7th happened, but do you know what I do when I don't know about something? I learn about it. I educate myself. I watched videos from Palestine. I read up on history. I read books written by Palestinian authors. Especially if you're a celebrity or an influencer, it's quite literally your job to be online to keep up with what's going on. At this point, any form of ignorance on this has to be deliberate. So people started blogging the celebs and all that stuff. Now, I think we all knew at the back of our minds that celebrities and influencers, despite how relatable they try to come off as, they're not normal people. They belong to a different class, different tax bracket. They may as well be living on a different planet. But so far, they at least pretended to be otherwise. They were able to pretend to be like normal people that an average person could relate to. But now, that illusion has been broken. And it was solidified through the Met Gala of this year, where they finally took off the wool over our eyes by essentially saying, we know what we're doing, but we just don't care anymore. And I think this serves as a microcosm of society as a whole. Society under neoliberalism was able to get away with pretending to be the good guys for so long, say through bombing Middle Eastern countries. In the past, they were able to justify it by claiming that people in those countries are barbarians and terrorists and we must save them through Western civility and values. But now, regardless of what they say, we know that is not true as we're watching a live genocide unfolding in front of us, funded by our own government, that we are paying for with our taxes, that these students, these young people are paying for through their tuition. The fact that the police were this quick to jump in and take action at students peacefully protesting, yet stood idly at the door when Uvalde happened, finally went on to show what the police is really there for. They're not here to protect and serve you, they're here to protect and serve the state, the capital. In the past, they may have been able to get away with pretending otherwise, but now that mask is completely off. Through Palestine, Western civility is dead. There is no more pretending to be the good guys when you're actively funding a genocide. For me, I knew all of this already, but for some young people, they're finally waking up to the fact that all these politicians, their government, their favorite celebrities and influencers that they look up to, they're not good people. And for some of them, it has hit a nerve. Combine that with the current state of the world where celebrities are able to pay $75,000 a ticket for a night out, whereas you can't even afford to pay for groceries, rent or other basic necessities, where cost of living is going up but wages remain stagnant, where the planet is getting hotter and hotter to the point flowers are blooming in Antarctica. It didn't take long for people to connect the dots together. And this brings me to my final point on why Gen Z in particular is so progressive and left-leaning. Aside from everything else that I mentioned, like technology, higher education levels, which tend to make a person lean more towards left politically, every other generation before us had something to fight for, had something to preserve. The boomer generation came about during the economic prosperity of post-World War II and was able to go to college for free, buy a house, raise a family on a single income, and were able to live the American dream. Gen X, the latchkey generation, still has some of the economic stability of boomers and grew up with more independence due to increasing divorce rates and more maternal participation in the workforce. Even the millennials, the Gen Y, came of an age of technological advancements, where they were at least promised of a better world, only to see it all collapse. But for us, the Gen Z, we came into this world that is already collapsed, where despite working full-time on a dual income, you still can't afford to live, where your government is using your hard-earned money that you have paid for taxes to fund a genocide, to contribute to further exploitation, further destruction of the planet, where you see cost of living, prices of things going up astronomically within every 5 to 6 years, not even a decade. The reason we're so urgent and so outspoken with our politics and activism is because we have no choice but to be so. The reason so little of Gen Z is interested in conservative politics is because there is quite literally nothing left to conserve. So, where do we go from here? Now, I'll be honest, I had trouble getting started working for this video, not just because I'm devastated at everything that is going on and how long it has been going on for, but also I felt like I had nothing new to add to the conversation. Everything that I said in this video has already been said before, far more eloquently by far more qualified people. I didn't know what else I could say that would make the situation any better, that will give hope. But then I watched this video of a Vietnamese cafe owner kicking out a Zionist couple from his shop. So this video of a Vietnamese cafe owner who kicked out his customers after discovering that they were from Israel has been going viral. The cafe is called Railway Tuan Cafe, run by the owner Tuan himself. I hope I'm saying it right. And he kicked out this Jewish couple who are content creators. You can look through their page on Instagram. They're Zionist. They fully support the state of Israel. They themselves have put the video up on their Instagram and they're getting absolutely roasted. Because when I tell you, this cafe owner did not hold back. He straight up told them to get out, that they're not welcome in his cafe. He was flipping them off, telling them to go to hell. He told his kids to be careful because Israel is going to bomb them. He pointed at the Free Palestine sticker that he had on this sign. And if that wasn't enough, when the couple posted a negative review about this cafe claiming that they were being anti-Semitic, basically just playing the victim, the owner responded again. You can pause and read the whole thing for yourself, but I'm just going to read out the last bit. We only welcome humans and animals, dogs or cats, but not vagrants and thieves and child killers. Free Palestine. I cannot even begin to describe how cathartic it was for me to watch this video. After months of seeing the so-called liberals, libertarians being all wishy-washy about a genocide, going, how can we know for sure that it's wrong to bomb hospitals and kill thousands of children? Seeing someone take such an active stance on this was so refreshing. And this is the kind of energy that I want us to have moving forward. Because the Zionists are not going to back down. They'll keep attacking, they'll keep bombing the hospitals, universities, innocent civilians, and they'll keep playing the victim when they're called out on it. So we need to keep resisting. We need to take an active stance and let them know that Zionism of any sort will not be tolerated. It's not going to be easy, it can get dangerous, it can feel really lonely and alienating at times, but we must keep in mind that we're on the right side of history. I'll leave some links in the description for you to check out. Donate to the Operation Olive Branch and the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund if you're able to. And if you're not in a position to donate, check out the Boycott, Divest, Sanction movement in your country to know what brands and companies to avoid. And if you're able to, join your local protest. Not only you'd be showing up to directly support the Palestinian people, but also it can help knowing that you're not alone, that there are hundreds, thousands of people that feel the same way as you do. And just keep going. Honestly, I'm so proud of us, but there is still so much more to fight for, and we have to be ruthless. So that's all from me for today. Thanks for watching, especially if you made it till the end. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Comment down below what you think, and I will see you in my next one. Bye! Free Palestine!